let's take a look at the headlines today. Berlin called to stick to Eurozone austerity. I've got another one. Europe in slump rethinks austerity. Austerity, as this is an example of, has literally been everywhere that we have turned lately. So it's being thrown around all over the place. What exactly does it mean? Officially, as in the Webster's definition, well, here it is. Austere quality, severity of manner or life, sternness, usually austerities of monastery life. Okay, well, that sounds pretty awful. I wouldn't want to live in a monastery or live a stern lifestyle. But does cutting back on government spending qualify as austerity? Austerity. Well, maybe in the short run for those whose incomes drop as a result. But what about longer term? What does austerity mean in that sense? Okay, there seems to be a popular notion among mainstream economists that there are periods, like the one we are in today, where the private sector willy-nilly just stops spending. This is otherwise known as a crisis in aggregate demand, and the solution, according to people like Paul Krugman, is for the government to step in and spend money. But why isn't the private sector spending? Again, mainline economists point to something called the paradox of thrift in order to explain this. Well, this paradox, they believe that people responding to negative expectations about growth, income, security, choose to save an ever greater amount of their declining income. And by doing what's in their best interest, as the theory goes, the whole of humanity drives itself and its economy to a grinding halt and back into the Stone Age. If everyone saves, there's no one left to spend, and if there is no one left to spend, then there is no economic activity, GDP contracts, incomes crash, savings evaporate. Essentially, it is a self-produced depression. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? Only it isn't. What economists like Paul Krugman, Ben Bernanke, and others fail to recognize, in our view, is that there's a reason the private sector isn't spending, and it has nothing to do with an elaborate psychological feedback loop. It's true that negative expectations about the future, sure, they reinforce a negative trend. But at some point, that trend does have to reverse. A bottom will form, and from the point of that bottom, the economy, well, what else does it have left to do? It'll go the other way. It'll rebound. So what then is preventing the bottom from forming? Enter the true four-letter word, DEBT, debt. The reason that the economy can't recover and the reason the private sector isn't spending is because it's in the process of deleveraging from a debt binge that has gone on arguably for almost 4 decades in the U.S. and with a bit more variation in Europe. The problem isn't a lack of demand. This is a symptom. The disease is a stock of nominal debt so large that it has created a negative drag on the economy. And attempting to carry this debt and not defaulting on it, not forgiving it, is a path towards feudalism, towards serfdom. And this is why we have bankruptcy laws for the private sector. The notion that this should not apply to government debt as well is bank propaganda. And as we have mentioned often on this show, excessive debt levels lead to the distortion of prices and the misallocation of capital. This misallocation ultimately pushes economies into recession. A recession isn't pleasant, but it is a natural economic process. You can't have booms without busts. And a recession is just the economy's way of purging itself of all the malinvestment created during the boom. In the economy, as in life, you can't run a race forever without taking a break. At some point, you need to rest. And if you don't do it on your own accord, you can bet your body's going to force you to do it. And debt, in that scenario, is a stimulant for the economy the way that amphetamines are for a runner. It may help you get more growth in the short term, but you will pay for some of that extra growth with recession later on. That's life. Nothing moves in one direction forever.